Man, I'm all disheveled here. But we're live. It's 3:16 in the afternoon. Hopefully you guys are all doing good. And hopefully everybody got all their shopping that they needed to do on the Black Friday to Cyber Monday stuff. We've decided to leave our specials up on our channel on the store, so you guys can get stuff hopefully for Christmas, or because just buy a camshaft and springs, buy a low buck truck cam and package, and then wrap it up secretly, and then put to your name from Santa. It always works. Put it under the tree. People think, "Wow, what happened? How did you get that?" How did I get exactly what I wanted? Because Santa knows what you want. And if nobody else is going to get it for you, then Santa needs to get it for you, right? Yes. So we left those up there. So those specials are still going on. So the Black Friday and Cyber Monday stuff, that's still going on. But today we want to talk about exhaust systems. And this is an interesting conversation. And it's a very similar situation to a lot of the other performance parts. If you're putting a camshaft in, you're doing an intake upgrade, you're doing an air intake, you're doing a tune, whatever you're doing, because the answer is, would you like to do an intake upgrade? Like if you got an LS, I've got a truck manifold on it. Do I want to put a fast on it? And do I want the power gains offered by a fast manifold? Yes. The answer is obviously yes. The question is, how much do you want it? do you want those gains that you get 10, 20, 30 horsepower, whatever the gain is? Do you want that $1,000 worth or $1,200 worth? Would you spend $20 on it? Yeah. Would you spend $50 on it? Probably so. Would you spend $1,200 on it? That's the thing. And that's the question for today. On exhaust system upgrades, what I did was we had a 383 stroker LS motor. So it was a 4.853 block, 4-inch stroke crank. We had 6/125 rods. And I think that we might have had Race Tech pistons on it. So flat top valve relief kind of thing. Those might have even been, I'm trying to think, the one that we tested on 550. Yeah, that's probably a flat top. So flat top pistons on it. We had ported heads on it. And let's see. In fact, let's take a look here. Let me take a look at my description here. Yeah, we had BTR dual springs. We had trick flow, as cast 220 heads. Let's see. Oh no, that's not the right one. I digress. Cathedral port. I thought that I had brought that one up. Here we go. 383 exhaust test. Hooker exhaust file test description. Here we go. Okay, so we had a 5.3 block. It was bored to 3905. It had K1 rods on it. That one had a Speedmaster crank on it. You can also get that stuff from Scat or whatever. And we had the Race Tech pistons on it. Trick Flow Gen X 225 heads, so CNC ported Gen X heads. Those are good. We had a pretty good sized crane on it, a 232, 242, 112 LSA. We had the fast intake manifold on it, a 102 inch and 7/8 headers. And then what we did was we ran on this 383, because this was a stroker 5.3 or a stroker 4.8, however you want to start your baseline motor, same block, so it doesn't really matter. But what we did was we ran long tube headers, and then we ran a 3-inch exhaust section, a length, and then mufflers. We normally run MagnaFlow 3-inch mufflers. They're a turbo style muffler, but they're straight in and out. And that's a good combination. It's very, not restrictive. We don't see a big change in power without having any mufflers at all. That it just makes the same power. Having the length there affects the power curve down low because there's more collector length, and so that all works out good. So we ran that the way that we normally do. We even ran it with just headers, and we didn't really gain very much, or we didn't gain any compared to the muffler setup. But then what we did was take that exhaust off and then ran a full exhaust. We ran a 2.5-inch exhaust from Hooker. We ran it all the way back, including the crossover and the mufflers and the tailpipe extensions back, excuse me, back behind the mufflers. This was on about a 550 horsepower 383 stroker. So when we did that, we lost about, compared to the 3-inch with open mufflers, a shortened setup, our rake setup that we use on the dyno, we probably lost 10 or 11 horsepower. And so the question becomes, did we expect that? Yeah, we did. A full exhaust is going, and especially going from 3-inch down to 2.5, and then going from a full exhaust to a fairly, 42-inch section or whatever. Ran the same headers. But going from one exhaust to the other, naturally there was a drop in power. There's a drop in flow on a 2.5-inch 2.5-inch setup, especially on a 550 horsepower motor. Not very many people would run a 550 horsepower stroker motor and then only put a 2.5-inch exhaust on it. Most people, if you were going to run even a full exhaust, you probably would think about doing a 3-inch. But if you did a 2.5, you'd lose a little bit of power. But the question isn't that. That I kind of expected that going in, having done exhaust tests on these things, especially something at that high horsepower. Most of the LSs that would be running around a cammed 4.8 or 5.3 or even a 6.0 are not going to be at that power level. So if you did that, the question is, at what point would you consider upgrading the exhaust? Like our example that I was talking about with a fast intake manifold. Yeah, we want that power, but how many people want that power at the expense of giving somebody else $1,200? Do you want to pay for that? And it's the same thing with the exhaust. Let's say that you could go from the restrictive exhaust, even a stock exhaust, which would probably be more restrictive, and then you put an exhaust on. At what point would you be willing to do that? Like, how much power would you have to gain? And then how much would you spend? Would you spend a few $100s on exhaust? Maybe you could do it yourself, weld it up. Maybe you could take it to a local muffler shop and he could do it, or she. Welders come in all genders. They could do that, or you could buy a complete exhaust like we did with that Holley setup. At what point is that worthwhile? I've seen some very, very expensive exhausts. If you go buy a titanium exhaust, a lot of the import stuff has done that, or even a full stainless exhaust, that's not a cheap deal. Exhaust systems can be more than $1,000. Are you going to do that for, let's say that you were going to gain 10 horsepower? Would you do that? Would you change the exhaust and spend that amount of money for that much of a gain? $1,000 to get 100 horsepower or 200 horsepower, like we think about for maybe adding a turbo or something. That's a pretty good deal. But would you do that for, the thing with an exhaust is not only would you potentially get power, but you also get sound quality. So a lot of guys buy a camshaft just because it sounds cammy, especially at the exhaust when it's running at low RPM when you're idling. It has that chop, and so a lot of people would buy it just for that. Hey, I support that. That's fine. That's your deal. You want. That's what you want. I kind of look for it in terms of power, but I'm a dyno guy, so that's what I look for. On the exhaust is the same way. The exhaust, particularly if you get something that has an H pipe or an X pipe on it, it's going to change the exhaust note. It's going to make it sound a lot better. That's a value added thing. That's a side benefit. It might be the major benefit for a lot of people, even more so than the power is, because it just sounds a lot better. And I have to admit, if you look at an 0304 Cobra Terminator motor with a good exhaust on it, particularly if you had put cams in it, it does sound awesome. And that's part of the appeal. That's part of the buying process. You're thinking about, yep, it makes more power. It looks awesome because the exhaust looks cool and it sounds awesome. And all of those things are reasons why, yeah, I definitely need the exhaust, right? I definitely have to get that. That's definitely there's too many pluses and it's just money on the minus side. And so I'm definitely going to get the exhaust. So let me know in the comments, would you guys get that? Or are you more of, look, I bought the headers and now I'm just going to run pipes. That's it. That's enough. I'm going to run dumps on it or whatever. Would you just do that and then maybe attach mufflers to that wherever they fit and do turn downs, do it the cheap way? We all do our own thing and we all make that work. But, at what point is, do the benefits, and a lot of benefits are perceived benefits. We get benefits from actually adding power, but the sound quality, the build quality, all these other perceived benefits that might be, personal to you, because maybe somebody else has a different opinion about that, but might be personal to you. Is that enough to overcome? Hey, look, I gotta shell out this amount of money that I've worked this period of time for. That's a section of my life that I'm trading. That the money for that Is that worthwhile? Then now I get to go out and enjoy it all the time. So let me know in the comments if that's something that you guys would you do. Okay, would you buy an exhaust system for your car, I should say, or truck? Because lots of truck guys. I'm a truck guy. Or truck based just on sound improvement. So does it just because it sounds cool? Would you get the exhaust just because it sounds cool? I have to admit, when I got my truck, I was pleasantly surprised that somebody had already done a muffler on it, because I think that mine's a single exhaust. I think it runs a dual back into a single, and that somebody had already done a muffler on it, and it sounds good. People ask me all the time, "Well, what kind of exhaust do you have on there?" I have an exhaust that somebody took the stock stuff off and put on some sort of cherry bomb style muffler, at Joe Schmo's like muffler shop. They just hack and slash and weld another thing up there, and that works good. But I have to admit, the truck sounds good. It sounds throaty. Sounds like it has more than a 350,000 mile stock motor that has all the timing taken out of it because of the knock sensors. I need to fix those. East Coast is in the house. Eric, Rich, what's going on? The answer is yes. That's right. The only thing I want to do is paint my fast manifold because it's hideous. Even a fast manifold is not great looking. So on the fast manifolds, do you like the black fast manifolds, or do you like the other color is like a grayish color, right? Do you like the black fast manifolds, or do you like the gray ones? Found a deal on the BTR equalizer. Cool. On the exhaust question, on 600 horsepower LS, are inch and 7/8 headers too restrictive? I don't think so. We've run them on much more powerful combinations than that. And I've seen, I talked to one of the big name LS guys out there that sell stuff for LS. He's like, "Oh yeah, we pick up 20 horsepower. We go to I can't remember if it was an 1 3/4 to 1 7/8 or 1 7/8 to a 2-inch step head or something." I've said, like, we don't ever see anything like that. 20 horsepower from something like that would be a lot, and we never see that kind of change. Sadly, my 3-inch X pipe gets knocked down a little going into the stock NPP muffler. Okay. Brum, brum. That's right. Next down. I get it. I'm cheap on exhaust, build it out of scrap, and cheap mufflers from milk. I liked, especially before they became like big time, when the guy's sons came and got them on social media. Now they're like world famous. But I used to go to this local muffler shop, and I would go through his cutoffs, all the stuff that he would cut off. I'm like, that's a really good section of 3-inch or 4-inch or 3.5-inch. And particularly if it's factory stuff, a lot of that stuff is stainless. I'm like, that he goes, you could have all that. I'm like, good. That's like turbo. That's turbo goodness there. That's turbo exhaust stuff. I like valve exhaust so I can close it when 5.0 shows up. I think the cab 5.3 sounds better with split exhaust, no X or Y pipe. You done a video on shorty versus long tubes? Yes, lots and lots of them, Tristan. There's a whole bunch of them. Shorty headers typically don't add power. Long tubes definitely do add power. Long tubes, off-road connectors with cutouts. Don't know the gains as it came to me that way. Cool. Rovers in the house. I'm trying to get the last 20 to 25, maybe up to $1,000. You put the eBay can on everything. Chop versus power is at least 60-40, not 70-30. Nobody knows that you gave up 5 or 10 on the street. Long tubes, always long tube headers first. Definitely for power. If I was building Bonneville cars and stuff, we'd definitely go long tubes. Have you done a test on gains on manifolds versus headers? Yes, lots of NA stuff, not on turbo stuff though. The full titanium exhaust system on my MC costs $2,300. Wow. My warranty falls off my AZL1. I'll do long tubes. I read recently cam specs for Oldsmobile engines, and a 1971 cam had 8 degrees of overlap, and another one, the GT car, had 108 degrees of overlap. It won't have 108 degrees of overlap. That would be too much. A video showing your preferred progressive stages and engine mods on your truck. I don't have preferred ones. You shouldn't listen to me because that's a subjective thing. What I do is show what all of the things do so that you can pick the one that you want. How do you want your 5.3 to do? Do you want it to be a turbo? Do you want it to be a blower? Do you want it to be nitrous? Do you want it to be cam? Do you want it to be any of the number of bajillion cams that you can get for it? I try to show as many as I can. I was going over this with the person that made silly comments today about me not testing. Essentially what he was saying in his comment was that I only test the cams that I want and I don't test the cams that he wants. And that's where this whole wrong cam scenario came from. It's like, no matter what cams I test, I've tested a lot. I've tested more than the vast majority of people in the United States. So I've tested lots of cams. But the number of cams that I've tested is a lot compared to the rest of the country. But the number of cams I've tested versus the number of cams that I haven't tested, there's way more cams I haven't tested. So I can't test all of them. And so it's just somebody saying, you know, wah, you didn't test the cam that I wanted tested. Okay, but I can't test all of them. And chances are very good that a cam that I tested, and especially if you put it in ranges of lots of cams I've tested, you can figure out where yours would be in there. Because if it's particularly on an LS, if it's something that fits in the stock piston to valve clearance, I've tested the whole range of stuff. So what you have is going to fit somewhere in the middle there. And, you know, you get lots of people that are, they're fixated on their thing being right. And particularly if they're part of a group of a camp of people, like I like this guy knows everything about camshafts. Well, maybe he does know a lot, but there's lots of other people that also know a lot. Your guy is not the only guy and not the best guy. And that's just a human nature thing. The sound quality definitely helps. If you don't get 100% yes, it's not going to be 100% on this one. I usually build the most of my own stuff unless I get a super cheap deal. Yep. Bought an entire Maserati Gran Turismo just because of the sound. Those are nice. Like my car quiet. Yep. Do the stealth thing. Unfortunately, a fast manifold, my car came in gray with oil stains on it. Yeah, they do stain. Black LSX RT. Yep, the black stuff looks good, especially with the red lighting or the red lettering on it. Both fast manifolds look awesome. How does the BTR equalizer stack up to the fast? It's not going to be close. The BTR equalizer, like the Trinity's a little better, I think, on top. But the equalizer is a short runner manifold designed to fit for hood clearance, but designed to run at higher RPM because it has short runners. And so the fast manifold up to 7,000 on most LS motors is going to be quite a bit better. I installed onboard air for boost control and for pneumatic exhaust cutouts with a MAC valve. There you go. If I bought something purely for sound, it would be on my daily, not for a max performance thing. That's a good point, Sean. Is it, you know, we should select the things based on what application it's going on. And for race thing, we do race things. And for street things, we do street things. I know it's off topic, but what pistons are in the 4.8 LS you put the turbos on? I've put turbos on lots of different LSs on this channel. I put it on lots of stock ones with ring gap on them, and that works very well. 148 that I did lots of testing on is I put JE Forge pistons on it because we had broke a set of pistons. The JEs were very small dome, and if I had it to do again, I would never get a dome piston for the LS. I would only get flat tops. But we did a lot of testing on that. Not going to lie, I fabbed up an equal length X pipe for my truck purely because of sound. A little bit of the vet howl came through. An X pipe does sound awesome. There's no reason, like if somebody told me I did an X pipe, I'm like, yeah, I'm with you. I'm all in on that. That's going to be perfect in every way. It wouldn't matter even if it gained no power. The way that it sounds is awesome. Thinking about swapping out my Flowmasters for some Borlas. Are mufflers necessary in a turbo engine? A high horsepower turbo motor is going to be noisy, and it depends on how you run the rest of your exhaust, but it would quiet it down. The turbo quiets it down compared to an NA one, but you know, you have this noise down here, and then you have an unmuffled one up here, and the turbo is somewhere in the middle, depending on output. Properly ordered 8421 exhaust sounds pretty sweet with a regular cross plane American V8. Richard, Truck Norris cam with full length stock mufflers. How much improvement with aftermarket throttle body to match the intake manifold? I don't know what intake you have, and I don't know what size throttle body you have on it right now. So let me know those, and I can give you a better answer. I would match the throttle body opening to the throttle body size to the opening in the intake manifold. Oldsmobile motors have a unique sound to them. Now I'm cheap and I want to build my own exhaust for aesthetics and hopefully sound. I built an X-Pipe for my C4. Was it hard to package on the C4? I'm certain the sound is created, made up for the extra 10 pounds of crossing. Sorry for my comment. I took too many vitamin C tablets. I was getting aggressive during our camp comment. When was that, Tim? I want to, if I don't remember when that was, I want to go back and read that because I'll hopped up on vitamin C. At least you're not going to get scurvy, right? Engine 7/8 ARHs on my LS3 Magnum supercharged NPP exhaust sounds amazing. That's good. LS6. I've run the American Racing headers on stuff on our dyno before. They worked well. LS62 is all deleted on the motor. Still has stock intake and exhaust. I want to do is a low buck truck and a truck fast manifold with shorty headers, no cats with muffler, have double springs on it now. Okay, you can do all of that. The shorty headers are not going to gain very much versus the stock manifolds, but they will be lighter. And so if you want to do that, you tested enough cams and know what others would be similar. I have, and that's the thing. I was saying if I have tested the cam on this side of your cam and I tested the cam on this side of your cam, we know where your cam is kind of what it's going to do. But people, and this is human nature coming through. People still think that there's a magic cam for a combination that's going to do better than every other cam in every aspect, and peak horsepower, peak torque, average horsepower, average torque, idle quality. It's going to give them the magic thing that no other cam is going to give them. That's not true. That's never going to happen. And then they also think that the person that they deal with, their cam expert, is the person to supply that, and that's also not going to be true. The cam testing Eric is doing, addressing the wrong cam, is perfect. The cam testing that Eric did is very specific to the test that he did and the motor that he did. 2.5-inch exhaust on the GXP from ZZP is nice. If you want more sound, don't run the resonator, but it's nice regardless. I'm making a 3-inch for the project. Is porting and dippling the LM7 oil pump worth the trouble? Porting, maybe. I wouldn't dimple the pump gears, though. I don't think that that's necessary. And again, it depends on what you're trying to do. For a street motor, I wouldn't do either one of those. I would just put the pump on and run it. I've never ported any of the pumps that we've run on any of the motors that we've run on the dyno. Junkyard versus decap versus aftermarket injectors. Well, on any of them, I would recommend flowing them so you know what they all do, so that you know that they're at least the same, particularly on the decap stuff. So you would definitely have to do that. Junkyard injectors are just going to be factory injectors, which you'd want to make sure that they're cleaned. And like I said, if you test them on a flow bench, you know that they all flow the same. And even aftermarket injectors, I think of all of those, the aftermarket injectors probably would be the most reliable, only because a lot of the junkyard stuff that we've seen been sitting for a long time with fuel in them, and they tend to get clogged if they're not cleaned. And so we run that through the cleaning cycle. And then after that, since they're factory injectors, they they usually work really well. But like I said, sometimes they need a cleaning. There's more than one person I've seen trying to put a cheap circle track cam in their first engine build. Why aren't you testing those? Why aren't I testing race cams for somebody to put in their first build? $69.70 cam I'm referring to is it has 328 degrees of duration at 50. Overlap is 108 degrees. Where are you measuring that overlap? Available in W30s. Hooker dropped hundreds of classic muscle cars and trucks with non-LS V8s. Yeah, they dropped most of their header stuff. Building a 5-liter Windsor, a stock bottom end, using twisted wedge heads, aiming for low 400. What compression should I be aiming for? Happy to replace pistons and mill heads. I don't think I would go more than a flat top piston on there. But you're going to need to get for 400 plus, you're going to need a good sized cam in there. So I would definitely put valve release in it. And I don't know what intake manifold you're using on there, but 400 is going to take a good intake manifold. 6.2 LS3, what's a good size exhaust? 2.5 inch or 3. Again, it just depends on your combination of sound quality and absolute performance. How much power are you trying to make with the 6.2? I put 3 inch, let's on my 5.7, and my 6.1. Only downside is drone. All my Rocket 350s sound exactly the same, even with different exhaust systems on them. 455 was just crazy loud because it was high compression. The exhaust note will also is a function of the exhaust system also, but also the motor, and not so much motor families as much as things like cam timing, static compression. Wide LSA 10.5 to 1. A Pontiac, distinct and very. So you like the sound of that particular combination? Very true on the cam selection. At least if they order from your store, they will know what they're supporting. The guy that helps them for free. It's beyond the best cam from just a certain guy. Yeah, I selected the cams because they carry a big wide range. In fact, I'm working on a deal right now that I'll tell you about later on, where we might be trying to do something more than just dyno test one of those cams. For the price of testing and decapping injectors, just get LS3 or better injectors. Aren't those hard to find? Yeah, you mean just buy them new online, or because in the wrecking yard I wouldn't ever see those. Low buck truck plus 6 liters at worth 15 horsepower over the regular. It is worth that much. And we have up on the store, we have graphs that show the difference between the low buck truck and the truck plus. The truck plus is about 15 better. It's better than the low buck truck from 5,000 on up, but it's down quite a bit below that. So again, it's always trade-off. What are you willing to trade? We all want that 15 horsepower, but in the case of the low buck truck versus the truck plus, it's probably it's down as much as 30 foot-pounds down low. So are you willing to make that trade? Those are factory Oldsmobile advertised cam checks. Yeah, so those are advertised numbers. So the overlap that we'd be talking about would be based on the advertised stuff. Can I make 450 horsepower with 862 heads? What is the max lift they can make without machine work? Yeah. And the max, you're not going to be worried about max lift because you're not going to be running a whole bunch of lift on a LS camshaft anyways. But yeah, of 450 horsepower, you could get with just a cam in a 5.3 if that's what you're trying to do. we've made more than 500 horsepower with an 860 with a stock 862 head, but on a 6-liter and a big camshaft. Systemax is amazing intake manifold on the 302. I agree, that is a good one. We ran a ported one that did really well. Do you have to get intake manifold milled when zero decking? Are you just zero decking the block? You're just making sure that the piston is zero decked? Like if you're decking the block to make sure the piston isn't out or down in the hole, that it's just at zero deck. You don't have to do anything to the intake manifold to do that. Well, I take that back. If you're cutting 30 off of the deck, that's probably not the case. The amount that you're cutting off the deck is probably not very much. I put a dual 2.5 inch from the exhaust headers to the X pipe to a MagnaFlow, 22 inches long, 3-inch single outlet behind the rear wheel. Might be me, but it's got more torque from 1600 to 5500. So are you basing that on just the way that it feels? Brian Tooley recently did a test of the single exhaust versus a dual exhaust, not exactly what you're talking about, but the single exhaust did add torque. I need to see where the range is. It's a fairly narrow range, but it's not 1600 to 5500. Good evening. Fully forged 408 with cathedrals. Got an S4 8596. What power will the turbo top out at? I don't know about that T4 turbo. I don't know about an 85. I'm thinking 11 or 1200 probably. VS Racing has some decent common used turbos right now. Okay, cool. I do like the guys over at VS Racing. Richard. That's why I bought a China-made eBay fuel filter tester, flow bench with Sonic Slim-X cleaner built in. It may help build up a set of matched decaps. Yeah, if you have some anything, as long as your flow testing method is consistent, like of itself, of like if you flow the same thing over and over and over again, that does the same thing. That way, you know if you flow different things and they flow differently, that it's not the machine, that it's actually the thing. So if you can flow them and get them all to flow the same, then that's all good. What is the price for a bore 30 over, hone, and line? Hone, zero decked, and milling intake if needed? I don't know. You have to check with your machine shop to see what those costs are. LS3 injectors are cheap on eBay and they have reliable data. Nisky 270 mega hydraulic is good choice for a stock converter. What's the best performing cast manifold for heads cam intake 5.3? Need to keep sound in check. Just get stock ones, or maybe the Holley ones at the cast manifolds. But the stock truck ones are fine. Love Flowmasters on a 5-liter Mustang. Richard, I recall Oldsmobile cam specs and ISKI from my 65 olds. 862s have the small valves. They're for the smaller LS engines. Most LS heads will support 450 or 500 horsepower. The real gains come from the cam. Not aiming for high horsepower. I want to build it for a truck. Richard, in terms of a 400 horsepower 5-liter, I have a tunnel ram with two 450 mechanical secondaries and a Victor Jr. Don't have a carb for the single plane yet. What intake and cam would you recommend? Well, if you're putting a tunnel ram on it, the tunnel ram is going to work really good. If it's a Wyand tunnel ram or something, that's going to work good. That's going to make more power than a single plane does. So of the two of those, I would pick the tunnel ram. For a cam, you're going to need at least that 274 cam that I like. Not cast, but give me a clean Trailblazer intake for a few $100 over the truck one. The Trailblazer definitely is better. L96 6-liter. Missed your response. Pop-up got me. It's a 3.8 small block Chevy RV cam. Went from 2-inch exhaust to 2.5-inch exhaust to a single MagnaFlow 3-inch. 706 are the small valve LS heads. On those auto tool type flow testers, it's better to upgrade to a Walbro pump inside for decapped, and 80 plus stock pumps can't keep up. You mean to when you're flow testing them? I know our Westex ASNU machine, the fuel pump that's in it won't keep up for high pressure stuff if you're trying to run 8 injectors, and they're all like big injectors. I mean, I would argue that the measuring tubes are too small for big injectors anyways. But so you have to, you can't run 65 PSI or whatever, and it doesn't have enough pump to flow big injectors at that pressure. L96 6-liter with a truck plus cam, stock bottom end, 80 millimeter turbo. What you recommend and what size wastegate or wastegates? You might as well just get a 60 millimeter wastegate. That will work fine. Fast LS6R 102 intake for the LS7. Currently building a 383 LS1 combo using a set of CNC ported 243 heads. How well would the spacer adapters work to fit them to cathedral ports? I don't know of an adapter that goes from LS7 to cathedral port. I do know of LS3 to cathedral port, but it's a terrible idea. The adapter things for those don't work very well on an NA deal. The only time I would recommend the adapters is when you're trying to put one of those blowers on a cathedral port deal, and then you could do it. Even the ultrasonic injector cleaner I bought, I hacked into it, installed new fuel hoses on the EFI fuel pump that runs it. Single 4-barrel tunnel rams suck, though don't bother. I disagree with that. I thought that there would be a distribution problem, but after seeing I think that Brule and Freiberger did one on a small block Chevy, and the single 4-barrel tunnel ram actually worked really well. What's the most horsepower you've seen from a cam and intake on a stock 351? I don't know. I don't think I've ever done a most kind of thing where we've tried to do that. And if you're talking about using the stock 351 heads, it's not going to be a lot because they're definitely going to be restrictive. I read the LS2 cast manifolds perform better than others with no data to back it up. They kind of look like Tri-Wise. Are you familiar with those? I've not looked at the the LS2 stuff. I've looked at the LS3 stuff because on some of the crate motors that we got, I did have an LS2 crate motor, and now that I think about it, I don't remember what happened to those exhaust manifolds. I think that what you would be looking at is on a cammed 6-liter or a cammed head 6-liter, the variation between all of the stock exhaust manifolds would be next to nothing. So you're not talking, going to the extra effort of trying to find some other exhaust manifold. Unless it was free, I wouldn't worry about that. Because if you go from stock exhaust manifolds to shorty headers and the gain is next to nothing, going to from one stock exhaust manifold to another stock exhaust manifold that's going to be very similar, I think you're trying to figure out how to gain almost next to nothing. And I don't think it'd be worth the trouble. I spent $350 to get factory NPP mufflers installed on my C6 just for sound. They're supposed to be good for 6 horsepower. I would not spend $1,000, but $350 was enough. Okay. Time for a Hellcat blower with adapters. I do want to try that because we did the Cadillac blower, so we should at least do the Hellcat blower, which I think is bigger than the Cadillac blower, right? Holes 455 best, 2,000, 5,800 RPM power band to focus on for street. 2.4 liter. Yeah, that's good size. Ran two 3-inch pipes from my headers to my T6 flange, but they both merge into one at the flange. Think this will kill much velocity? No, because you have to merge them to that size anyway. The turbo is going to be that size. I should have gone smaller, but I had 3-inch on the shelf. Exhaust gives your vehicle a soul. Yeah, I got 1 more minute. I got to go. We're going to end our poll at 58%. Yes, I would buy that sound. I've got people here. It is time to go. On that note, it is time to go, but I will be back tonight. I will see you guys all later.